Well, listen, so we'll start off with one question. I think actually you and I talked about this when we were first talking through having this retreat and what the theme might be. Rich Gifford asked a question, actually asked a couple of questions, so I'll get you to ask one of your own in a bit, Rich. But to start us off, there's a question about the relationship between the kind of practice that you're advocating, particularly practice based in the body, and the freedom and flexibility within that to kind of develop your own sense of your practice and how you want to do it, and its relationship to quote-unquote orthodox true practice. I suppose a general kind of question about experimentation and where individual approaches to practice and to meditation fit within the system of practice or within True Ratna. There you go, a nice soft, easy one to start off with.
Yeah, well, I suppose first thing I'd say is that might sound a bit odd, but I'm not really that au fait with what's being referred to as the orthodoxy of True Ratna. I don't really know what that is these days because probably for the last 28 years or so. I mean, I went out to San Francisco with Parama Bodhi, well, that was in the 90s, and I was out there for 8 years, and we kind of did what we did, yeah. And I haven't been personally involved with the ordination. I think if there is a sort of orthodoxy, though I'm a bit reluctant to use that word, I must say, but if there is a kind of orthodoxy, I guess it's most pronounced within the ordination process, which I can't really comment on, to be fair, because I haven't been involved with it for so long, at least 20 years really, since I left San Francisco. I was a bit involved with it I was involved with it when I was in America, but I haven't been since then. In the end, I think, I was thinking of the Buddha's last words, wasn't it? Something gets variously translated, but something like, be a light unto yourself. I think in the end, one has to follow one's own experience, but I also think there's a kind of craft element to meditation that probably the sort of basics need to be learned. And I suppose the most basic thing is that you do need to be able to sustain attention. And so, a practice like the mindfulness of breathing is, I think, fundamental, But of course, there's lots of different techniques, In some traditions, you count the breath. That's not in early Buddhism. You don't get that counting, and that comes in a bit later, doesn't it? So anyway, there's a whole variety of forms of that meditation, and we've got one particular one, which is, I think, just because that's the one that Sangharakshita was taught when he was in India, and he brought that back, and that's what we've got, And counting the breath might or might not suit you. It has its very positive, but also for some people negative aspects to it, And I think I said today at the beginning of the morning, actually everything I do feel has kind of come out of these basic practices. And I'm a bit concerned if people think I'm not really trying to offer different practices. I feel that I'm just exploring those practices in a slightly different way, I think at some point, if you're going to be a long-term meditator, maybe it's partly a personality thing, but for me, in order to sustain meditation, I have to find it interesting. I have to feel that I'm actively investigating my experience and my approach to meditation. So for me, it's essential that feels like there's some evolution in my understanding and approach to meditation. Without that, I think I'd find it really dry and not really very engaging. I've never meditated because I think it's good for me. I do think it's good for me, but I hope it's good for me. But that isn't my motivation for meditating. My motivation for meditating is that, again, it's a sort of matter of language. These days, I would use words like, I want a deeper intimacy with myself, and I want a deeper connection with the world, and I want a deeper sense of love. So that's my motivation. I would try and find ways that, if I take the Metta Bhavana, for instance, I'll try and find ways to facilitate what that meditation is trying to bring about, you know. So it's the spirit of the meditation. I think it's very important that we understand the spirit of meditation, and we take techniques for what they are. They're techniques, and they can be extremely useful at a certain time, and maybe at other times, you know, you need to take a fresh look and take a fresh approach. I do think meditation is evolving in Triratna, and I guess it's always a balance, isn't it, between trying to have a meditation that's exploratory and imaginative, but also having some sort of commonality of understanding. And I think we're all working with that balance, and some people are going to be more on one side than the other. You know, I've kind of always tended to rather go my own way with it. And, you know, to be fair to Triratna, personally, I'm sure there's some people that probably don't think much of what I do, but I've never felt constrained. I suppose that's the other question, isn't it? Why do we feel constrained about what other people think? Or, I don't know, I could go on forever about this, you know, unravel it a bit, but maybe that's sufficient.
Maybe, Rich, you could ask your follow-up question about the Nigredo and spiritual deaths, since that's also connected to Triratna practice, as it were.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely answer. Very thorough, Paramananda. Great. Thank you.
Hello, Rich.
I wondered if I'm right in thinking that there's a connection between the Nigredo to albedo stage and spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, or am I making a very connection?
I think... No, I think that's a fair enough connection to make. Yeah, I think that's fair enough, yeah. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, in terms of, you know, one of the practices they tend to emphasize, that I believe that's probably still the case, it was when I got ordained, is they emphasize the six element practice, don't they, connected with this idea of spiritual death. I was actually thinking, well, that's quite an alchemical practice, isn't it? That six element practice. Trying to sense into those elements within your own self, you know, your own physical, psychophysical self, and then trying to build a relationship between them as they occur in you and then as they occur in the rest of the world. So I would say that's a very kind of alchemical approach, actually. Though, of course, it might not be framed quite in that way, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's fair enough to make that linkage. Yeah, I'm quite interested in the fact that alchemy, I was going to say it starts with that. I mean, that's not quite true because it is a sort of circulation, but it's normally seen as the first stage because of this idea that before something can really change, that it has to sort of break down to some extent. Something has to sort of give way. But of course, there's a whole kind of preparatory thing before you actually get into the alchemical process proper, which could be likened to the development of mindfulness. That mindfulness needs to be there before you can really usefully engage. But I suppose with the Nigredo, the other thing where it just happens in our life, doesn't it? It just happens in our life. And I don't think we should necessarily go looking for it, but it will happen, you know, because that's life, isn't it? So the short answer is yes.
Yeah. Short answers are good. We've got so many questions, there's absolutely no way we're going to get through them all. So let's do one word answers from now on. That'll be perfect. Yes or no? Okay, yes? Is it good? Is it not good? Fine.
Or maybe. I have a maybe.
Maybe, that's right. Yes or maybe. The alchemical ground of maybe. Yeah, so Sharon Atkins, if you're out there, you sent in 3 questions. Probably we've only got time for one. I don't know if you want to pick your own questions, if you can remember them, or I can give you a refresher. I think the first one's a good question. To what extent can Buddhist ideas be separated from meditation practice? i.e., the possibility of abiding by embodying Buddhist ideas being somehow divorced from any meditation. Can Buddhist ideas stand alone? It's a reflection based on her experience of the retreat.
Well, meditation is kind of the formal aspect, isn't it? Where we're trying to sort of cultivate something, but of course, in a way, our experience in meditation isn't really that important in a funny sort of way. Or its importance, I suppose, is how it affects how we are in our daily life. And I think all these, I think what we're doing in meditation is really just preparing for how we behave in everyday life. And of course, all these elements can be, to some degree or other, brought into everyday life, whether it's mindfulness, there's a lot of that about now, isn't there? We can be mindful on an everyday level. We can be mindful when we're cooking or washing up or getting dressed or any time we want. And, we can also try and be with our heart, if we want to use that language, when we're with people, try and really abide with people, so I don't really see the difference in a sense, other than, as I say, when we meditate, we are, consciously putting aside time to sort of approach it in a more formal sort of way, a structured sort of way, so I hope, does that address what was being asked? I'm quite sure if
Shan, you can give a thumbs up if you like in the chat. But it sounds quite good to me as an answer, Paraminder.
Yeah. I wondered if I was missing something in that question. I didn't quite.
Shan says yes, thank you in the chat. So thank you.
Okay.
You hit it. And my apologies. I should, of course, have said if you don't want to ask your own question, that's totally fine. Just drop us a note in the chat, and I'm happy to ask it for you. Somebody actually asked a general question, which was, would you have access to the poems that have been featured on the retreat? The answer is yes. Because of copyright reasons, we can't just post the poems up on the internet, but we can distribute them privately. So we'll send everybody who booked on the retreat a message through the booking system with a link to the file of all the poems. And if you've just come to attend the retreat sort of ad hoc and didn't book in advance, that's fine. Just drop us a note and we'll send it to you as well. Okay. So Katie Morley asked a question. I think, Katie, you're happy to ask it yourself, right? If you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you so much for this retreat. It's been incredible. I have been wondering if you have any advice. You might have just touched on this in your last answer of how to deal with present traumas so they don't become like dark psychic forces buried within us. Or however you want to describe the energy blocks.
I think one of the main things we're trying to do when we meditate is allow ourselves to feel what we feel, and not have a kind of judgmental attitude to it, that, I should or I shouldn't feel this. We're trying to be more sensitive to what we feel. But that doesn't mean, we necessarily express it in action. I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting the more that you allow yourself to, whatever it is, grief or whatever it is, you allow yourself to feel it at the time to the degree that you can, it's a lot less likely to kind of cause you problems in the future, I think, to block you, But that doesn't mean it won't be difficult, because sometimes we do feel, grief is difficult, or, disappointment or envy, or all these things that we all feel. I think the problem comes if we don't allow ourselves to feel them, and I think this is such a fundamental thing, really, but it's hard. I don't want to pin it down too much, but it's something about when things go up to the conceptual level. James Hillman gives this very good example. He says, he's talking about dreams, okay? He's saying, you have a really disturbing dream. In the moment you wake up, you start thinking, oh, that was because so-and-so said this to me, or blah, blah. You immediately start to kind of rationalize it. And he, he uses this phrase, I've already mentioned this, he's always saying, well, following Jung, saying, stay with the image, So it's like, if we give ourselves time and space to feel what we feel, that I think on the whole we can trust that will work for us, I'm not totally satisfied with this answer because I think it could be misleading. The thing is, what we've been trying to do here, although it might not be entirely apparent to people, is come back to the kind of I don't know how to express this, but the kind of energetic patterning of what's producing these ideas or thoughts, rather than trying to unravel them or find a solution. So it's a kind of abiding, but we do need, in order for this to be possible, we do need a kind of stability. We need to develop a kind of stability, which I've been suggesting is done primarily through the posture, So if we have the right attitude, so by posture, I don't just mean our physical posture, I mean our kind of attitude, If we welcome what happens to us rather than trying to avoid it or manipulate it, I think energetically it remains more fluid, so it can move on, It's quite natural to, if you have your heart broken or whatever, you're going to feel bad for a while, it's just how it is, But you can have some kind of spaciousness around that, perhaps, or some kind of, metta, some kind of kindness to yourself, and not think, well, I shouldn't be feeling this, or I should be feeling this. Does that answer what you're saying, or is that?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's a danger, just to add to that, I think one of the real dangers of the spiritual life is this kind of idea of perfection in a way. Of course, perfection can mean different things, or purification, and it's like sometimes, this is an interesting thing because actually it brings me back to actually quite often I think we get involved with meditation because we don't want to feel certain things. We want to kind of be above them and so that we can look down benevolently on all these suffering beings down there and feel compassion for them, But of course we're a suffering being, it's not, and it's a bit like sometimes we get involved in something like meditation because we want to sort of rise above it rather than move through it. I think we do have to move through this material. We can't just rise above it, you know. I think that this is kind of softening into ourselves rather than a sort of ascending above, you know, sort of leaving all the messy stuff of us, our lives and who we are behind, you know. It's like we have to make relationships with those difficult parts of ourselves. And then, you know, and well, we had that little Leonard Cohen thing, didn't we? You know, forget your perfect offering, you know, ring the bells, it's still a ring, you know. We don't want to, we want to be more human, don't we? Well, this is my feeling. I don't want to rise above being a human being. I want to be more human. I want to be more familiar with myself, and but I don't necessarily have to. Just because sometimes I might have so-called negative feelings, I don't have to then compound that by giving myself a hard time about it, you know. So it's quite a delicate, nuanced thing we're talking about, and so it's quite hard to generalize about, really, I think. Because, of course, you know, we can overindulge certain things, or we can over-identify with being a victim or being whatever, you know. So there's all sorts of dangers. There's no easy answer. But I think, you know, if we're moving towards awareness and love, we're not going to go too far wrong, you know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Actually, staying with kind of things soulful, and you mentioned Hillman there. Ujjwala Matti, I don't know if you want to ask this question yourself. You'd be welcome to, or I can ask it too, about you were looking for some references.
Yeah, hi, Paramananda.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I've heard you refer to James Hillman before, but I've never actually, despite reading a bit of Jungian stuff, I've never delved into him, and I wondered if there was a particular kind of starter reference that you would recommend to read.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Well, no, it's not a polite question to ask. I was wondering how old you are.
Me, I
can't see you, so I can't see a picture.
I'm Sela Prabhu's sister, Eve's sister.
Oh, hello.
I'm her youngest sister.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You might get me now.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I'm currently 55.
Okay.
Or 1005 in Triratna years.
Well, okay, you're probably a bit young. If you were a bit older, I would have maybe suggested The Force of Character by James Hillman, which is a bit, but you're too young for that, because it's about aging. I mean, it's a fantastic book. With Hillman, I nearly always recommend there's a Hillman reader called the A Blue File or the Blue File, I think it's A Blue File, which is a sort of reader, and it's got extracts from lots of his work in it. So I tend to recommend that. I think my two favourite Hillmans are Healing Fiction, a book called Healing Fiction, which is quite an early one, and one I've already mentioned is Alchemical Psychology, which is just a fantastic set of essays. But I should say that Hillman's not to everybody's taste. I mean, he did do a couple more popular sort of books, like The Soul's Code. So that might be quite a good place. I didn't particularly like it. I thought it was sort of dumbed down Hillman. But So yeah, I would say start with a blues fire, a reader, a blues fire. Is it Thomas Merton is the editor of that? I can't remember. Yeah, so I'd recommend that really. Or there's a nice talks by him on YouTube or whatever. You know, it's nice videos of him speaking, which is quite nice because you get a sort of sense of his character because he's actually quite playful and yeah, which you don't necessarily get from the book. So yeah, you should check out that.
Thank you. That's a great jumping off point, and thank you for saying I'm too young to read something. That's made my day.
He's such a charmer.
And do give my love to Eve, eh?
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Can I recommend one more, Matthew, which is The Dream in the Underworld by James Hillman?
Oh, yeah.
That's a fantastic book.
Difficult, isn't it?
Kind of. It's a sort of book you have to read all the pages twice, but it's really exciting.
You do have, yeah, I mean, Hillman, you do often have to read them. I mean, I don't know how many times I read some Hillman, like healing fiction and art. Yeah. You can go back to it again and again. I think Hillman's a great person to read, actually, because he does it, for me, his writing also embodies his methodology, if that makes sense, which is a kind of poetic methodology. He's not trying to answer your questions, really. He's trying to open them up all the time. You know, all the time he's trying to open things. You say something, then you immediately sort of flip it and say something that seems completely contradictory. You know, and he's saying when these two things exist together, you know, it's a bit like when Heidegger says, you know, whenever you reveal something, you also obscure something. You can't reveal everything at once, you know. So when you shine a light on some aspect, you also always put something else in shadow, you know. And Hillman's very conscious of this. There's always things are always more complex. You know, when we simplify things and say, well, it's this or it's that, well, that's always only part of the story, you know. And I think from a meditative point of view, to really, really understand that or get what that means is so useful, you know. I mean, I quite often think whatever, you know, it's like when I do the question and answers about meditation, I know whatever I say is just part, you know, just one aspect, you know, it's just one possibility, and there's always other, you know, you can never give a kind of definitive answer that's going to cover everything. It's just not possible. And yeah, so it's this freedom. We had that little, E. Cummings poem, didn't we, at one point about may my heart always be open to little birds. It's got that line, may my mind roam about hungry and fearless. I get that feeling from Hillman. He had a very fearless mind, you know, he's dead now, but had a very fearless mind. You know. He would go places where other people wouldn't go.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read a question from Manjamati now. This is kind of a bit more like a reflection, but there's a question in it around a kind of quality of awareness. So Manjamati is describing an experience of getting dull and sleepy in meditation, and then coming back into the body, bringing breath into certain parts of the body, and this kind of relationship between physical awareness and breath awareness, and then second guessing, I think, himself around his experience, like asking himself if he's just fooling himself. And there's a kind of question, reflection about sati, the kind of quality of mindfulness, which he describes as a receptive knowledge and deepening of experience. And so there's a question in there, I think, around, you know, yeah, when you're having your experience, like what is your experience, and then what do you bring to that as sort of reference?
I mean, I'm a big fan, my main meditative influence really has been Chan or Zen Buddhism, I think, even though it might not seem like it. And I think they've got it right. They say to take the posture to have the correct state of mind. There's no special state of mind to be found outside of the posture. I mean, I think you have to take posture in a very broad way, but that's what we're not. This is my opinion, right? And I might well be wrong, but I really don't think you can think yourself out of your mental. Well, see, this is what I was saying before. I'm not sure I can say this, but what I'm trying to do when I'm meditating is to maintain and deepen the posture, really. And I'm not really trying to control my mind one way or the other, But I am trying to bring the awareness into the posture, which sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? But maybe, I don't know. But I do think so. When he gets sleepy, probably what's happened is that the posture's collapsed to some extent. If the posture's still maintained and hasn't collapsed, I wouldn't worry about being sleepy. I wouldn't worry about it. If you can still maintain the posture, I really wouldn't worry about it. We didn't do it in this retreat because I didn't go out, but the traditional Soto Zen posture places a real importance on the hand mudra, the way we hold our hands. And we hold our hands with our thumbs very, very lightly touching. And so it has got a bit of a focus. It's got breadth and focus. But the focus is in this very delicate touching of the thumbs. And that becomes a sort of way of monitoring the quality of awareness you're bringing. Because if you become vague, the thumbs will tend to drift apart. Or if you're becoming too willful, the thumbs will tend to press together. And I'm not necessarily saying everybody should meditate like that. It takes a bit of getting used to, because the arms aren't supported. They're just pressed lightly into the body below the navel. So the kind of oval bit circles the navel. But I find that hugely useful, but I'm kind of trying to let my mind just get on with it. I'm work. I mean, of course, this is just a way of speaking, because the work of the posture also, of course, has a mental, there has to be some kind of cognitive, sometimes it's cognitive, but there has to be some kind of, so it's a false dichotomy in a way, but personally, the way I work is more or less purely with the posture. Then what happens. If that answers the question. Was there another bit of that question? How are you fooling yourself? Well, that's such an interesting question, isn't it? Are you fooling yourself? I think for this, we have to learn again, which is a difficult distinction to make, but we have to kind of learn the different felt quality of what I would call imagination, and we're using this word in quite a particular way here. The difference between what I would call imagination, which is material arising from the depths, if you like, arising from the unconscious into the conscious. We have to learn the difference between that and fantasizing, which is just the ego going off on one. And fantasizing is not helpful, I don't think. Even if you're having a lovely, beautiful, spiritual fantasy, I don't think it's helpful if it's just your kind of conscious mind constructing it. And of course, that's not an absolute distinction, because whenever we have an experience, if as already discussed to some extent, the ego will always try to appropriate the experience that you're having and then start manipulating it. And that's fantasy. As soon as we start manipulating things, it tends to move into fantasy and away from imagination. Again, we come back to this idea of trying to stay with the image. In this sense, the image might be a physical feeling, it might be a memory, it might be all sorts of things, not necessarily a visual image at all. But we're just trying to stay with the material rather than manipulate the material, which doesn't mean we fix it, because it means that we try and it's very tricky, we're trying to listen to the material and let the material unfold if it's got a kind of energetic, dynamic quality to it. The stuff that comes up from the unconscious is kind of dynamic, got a dynamic quality, and we're trying to sort of open up around it and let that material move in the way that it wants to move, if that makes any sense to people. And we do that, this comes back to the we do that primarily by trying to, in alchemical sense, maintain the vessel, which is a posture, and maintain the right fire, the right sort of energetic approach to it. So we don't get too overexcited and carried away, or we don't get too, we don't lose energy and just slump or collapse into the material. So it's a delicate business. It's a craft, and it takes a long time. And sometimes we get it right. Sometimes, most of the time, we get it wrong to some degree, but that's okay as well. What did Dogen say? The spiritual life is one continuous mistake. I've always loved that. Not quite sure what he means, but I find it very reassuring.
That's great. Maybe we could do there's a question about, can we do a follow-up retreat? We could do a follow-up retreat later in the year called One Continuous Mistake, where people just come and screw up for 4 hours every day and rejoice together.
Well, it's never a screw up, is it? Just the fact that in our culture now, the fact that you sit down and do nothing is just so valuable. The fact that you stop this headlong kind of assertion of yourself into, the fact that we can just stop is so against the cultural norms now, Even when we relax, we relax by looking at a box set and, eating chocolate or drinking wine or whatever our vices happen to be. Not that either of them are particularly viceful, are they? But you know what I mean, whatever our indulgences happen to be. Which, of course, in meditation, we're trying to relax in quite a different way. We're trying to relax into our own selves, And to make time for that is hugely valuable. Just to sit still and be aware is so valuable. And there's so little of it anymore. We've lost, our lives are so full of stuff, We've got a kind of mental consumerist culture as well as not only the consumption of material things, this obsession with information and all this stuff just coming in all the time, and just to sit quietly You know, the most important thing in meditation is that we're sitting still. It's simple that we're just sitting still in an aligned posture and allowing things to sort of unfurl, and there's some time for them to maturate, there's some time for them to become embodied. We're not moving on to the next thing all the time. We've all got, I'm very, so I'm rambling on here, but I'm quite passionate about this. That you've all, unless you're under, you know, unless you're in your sort of 20s still, which, you know, fantastic. You know, when you're young, you want experience. Once you're sort of mid-30s or something, you don't need more experience. You don't need more experiences. You need to maturate. You know, you need to allow them to compost or become embodied. You know, it's like, you know, we rush around, you know, like on holiday, we rush around one thing to another. Or we go to an art gallery and it's a huge exhibition. Well, you're much better off just sitting in front of one painting, aren't you? You know, for a half an hour. You know, and it's the same sort of thing. You know, we've got this. Because we're caught up in it, I don't think we realise how kind of frenetic our culture is now. You know. Anyway, so I'm going off.
It does lead into. I'm going to do a bit of compressing now, folks, because we've got quite a number of questions and not that much time left. So, just in terms of touching on that stuff about, you know, what's the antidote to information overload and something again in the body and just being grounded and maturating in the body. There's a few people commenting on the drumming. One person talking about allowing themselves to just respond, make noises, shake. And so one bit of the question is about, would you say something about the physical manifestation of drumming and its effect on the body? And then somebody else saying, can you talk about the significance of using the Vajrasattva mantra when you're drumming? Is it a form of purification?
See, all these questions kind of presume that I've kind of worked this all out, which isn't the case really. I mean, quite a lot of people do shake or have a physical response to the drumming, and I think that's positive. You know, it's a good thing. There's something being released, so that's positive. But you can get addicted to that sort of thing, which isn't necessarily so positive. But let's not worry about that. But in general, I'd say that's very positive, and along with the vocalization, of course, that might be a bit problematic if you're doing it with a lot of people. But if you're doing it at home, yeah, why not vote? Yeah. I mean, vocalization is a way of. I mean, quite often, even with speaking, just normal speaking, you know, you start speaking and you find yourself saying things that you didn't even know were there, you know. So the act of vocalizing allows material to come up, you know. So I think that's all great. The Vajrasattva mantra, I don't know, I just started doing it for myself at home, you know. I mean, in my personal practice these days, I very often drum, maybe for about 20 minutes or so, and then just sit, you know. And I just started doing a Vajrasattva mantra. Yeah, probably because it's a blessing, isn't it? I saw it more as a blessing. You know, I don't got to be dodgy translating this thing, but it's look at the I can't remember it off by heart, but you know, be strong for me, you know, accord me all perfections, you know. Anyway, you know, it's a very positive kind of blessing, really. And I like this idea of blessing. I like this idea of blessing ourselves and being blessed and being in this relationship with the world, or however you want to do it, think about it. So yeah, I suppose I'm sort of doing it as a blessing, really, and cooling down. A cooling down of a blessing, really. And of course, he does have this very strong purification. I've always had a bit of well, less so these days, but I've always been a bit dubious about the word purification, because I think I've already mentioned that. I think it's a bit, sometimes we can mistake that for perfection or something. Yeah, well, that's it, really, yeah. I just like the mantra, really, and I do like the idea of us being blessed in a way, a self-blessing.
Yeah, so Claire asked a question. Actually, I'll bundle this in with a couple of other questions. Claire was asking about some of the Taoist themes that you've touched on. And she was wondering if you'd kept your own Tai Chi practice going since you started meditation or became a Buddhist, and had you advice around making use of Tai Chi or Qigong as a support for meditation. There's a couple of other people asking questions about the body. One person asking about Hakuin's leg exercises, which I think you talked about in that particular session the other day. And also Rob asking a question about holding tension in the eyeballs when you're meditating, and is there anything you can do about that? So I don't know if you can say something generally about the body and kind of body movement, etc.
Well, I would say, I think, these days, to be honest, for myself personally, I feel exercise is probably more important than meditation for me now, and obviously if you can exercise in a meditative way, that's fantastic, I actually was involved in Tai Chi before I was involved in Buddhism. I was for a few years quite seriously involved in Tai Chi with Master Lam, who used to teach in London, and then I got ordained, and but I still do the form. I don't do it every day, but I do it most days. It's still very much there. I do the form that I learned 35 years ago, and I just do the same form, But I think one finds one own. Some people might like Tai Chi, some people yoga or whatever, or just dancing, moving. I think it is very important to try and keep a kind of physical, energetic freedom, in the body. And I don't see so much difference really, because I just think it's a bit more subtle. When we meditate, I think we're doing the same thing, but just on a slightly more subtle level in a way. We're still interested in kind of the energetics of the body. So to me, they're pretty similar, really. What was the other bit of that? Was there more to that?
No, I think that's kind of okay. We probably don't have time to go back over the whole thing with Hakuin. There is Sachin asked that question. There is a particular thing, but maybe you could just give the highlight of that.
I don't know. I can't remember the specific exercises given to Hakuin. I'm not even sure that it gives the detail. It's in Wild Ivy, his autobiography, I think. But I'm not. If he does actually specify what the exercises were, it hasn't stuck with me. It was something he did just before going to sleep. That's what I remember. I can't honestly remember what they were.
So this will be the last question.
The eyeballs. I didn't know about the eyeballs. I mean, I'm quite.
Sorry, the what? The eyeballs. Yeah.
The eyeballs. There's a question about tension in the eye.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that really. I'm sorry. I find that quite an emotive question really, because of my own eye. I don't actually suffer from tension in the eyes when I meditate. bit outside of my own experience. I suppose, you know, just as we sort of try and gently breathe any part of the body, you could try that with the eyes, you know, just gently kind of imagine breathing through them. Not quite sure if it's that drive or around, but I don't know. I'm not sure how to help with that one.
Okay. So the last two questions are all bundled together again before we meditate.
Right.
Two people, Shunyamala and Marco Gutierrez, asking questions about sort of energetic aspects of meditation, and particularly relating to the heart. Marco has a very nice phrase where he says, basically, sorry, I've got lost in my notes here for this. Yeah, he's talking about energy getting trapped in lumps and blockages in the body, and not nurturing the heart enough. That was the phrase I was trying to come to. He says, I realise that I do not nurture the heart enough. And then Shunyamala, another lovely question is about her heart when she's fearful and relaxed, and the heart's scared to relax or release. She says she was wondering where else in the body could indirectly lead towards the heart. So there's something about energy and the relationship to kind of holding in the heart.
Hello, Shunyamala, by the way. Hope you're well.
Yeah, well, great to hear you and see you.
Well, I think, was this ways into the heart where we are? So I'm having difficulty.
Shunyamala, do you want to ask your question, and you can see if touch on Marcos?
Yeah, I mean, subconsciously, I think maybe I'm afraid to let go or release in the heart. And specifically, when you brought this image of the lungs wrapping and massaging the heart, which felt so wonderful. But my heart did get quite excited about that energetically.
Yeah.
And it was maybe too much. So I want to kind of explore, move through whatever, encourage a release, but maybe in a more indirect way.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is right, you know, but my intuitive response to it would be to try and kind of maybe strengthen the connection upwards to the throat and downwards to the kind of navel, you know. So like try and support the heart by it being more connected, if that makes any sort of sense to you.
It does, yes.
Yeah, that's my intuitive response, but I mean, you know.
Yeah, so it's not just the heart, it's supported. Thank you.
I think so. The heart does, you know, have, you know, I've talked a bit about this. The heart does need to be supported, you know, and it certainly needs to be supported from below, you know, so that connection through the kind of belly down to the root, I think is really quite important, you know. I think I mentioned it on the retreat, you know, in the White Lotus Sutra, it tells us, isn't it, that the white lotus doesn't bloom out of the air, you know, it blooms from the mud, you know, it blooms from its roots, you know. So if if the heart feels a bit fragile and scared, it needs support in a way. And of course, it's just taking it easy, and with all these things, not trying to force some process, you know. Maybe, you know, it's just got its own time, hasn't it? And its own. If we've got that, I think the main thing, if we've really got that desire to open the heart, we will find our way, you know, as long as just make sure that that way is the way of love, really, you know, tenderness and towards ourselves, yeah. But I think, you know, again, the alignment is important, you know, so the heart is sort of connected and it's not just sort of isolated and trying to do everything.
Okay, well, we actually got through all the questions more or less. Parminder, do you want to say something more before you do the meditation?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, we mustn't take the heart. I mean, it is a physical organ, and I think that, you know, to encounter it as a physical organ is important, but also it's the strongest kind of metaphorical part of the body, arguably. You know, and may be rivaled only by the sex organs. You know, it's got so many metaphorical meanings. You know, we're not just working with the physical organ; we're working with the kind of imaginal organ. And of course, as an imaginal organ, it's quite mobile. You know, our heart can sink; it can come into our throat. Can do all sorts of things, you know. So it's quite a mobile. You might find the heart in your throat, you know. You might find the heart down in your belly, you know, down in the basement. So that's the, you know, it's quite a mobile organ, as an imaginal organ. Hope that doesn't confuse people. So again, you know, this, yes, it's a physical organ, but don't literalize it, you know. It's also a metaphorical organ, you know. And metaphor is how we make meaning, really, how we connect things up. I think the etymology of metaphor is something to do with a bridge, isn't it? So it's the way we link things that are separate up through the metaphorical appreciation of them, if that makes any sense.
Yep, perfect sense. So we've got about 20 minutes or so left, Parminder. I know you were interested in meditating and maybe even transferring medits or whatever if we've got time. And after the sit, we'll come back and we can all thank Parminder out loud. Oh, nice.
Okay, well, I thought it'd be nice to end on a kind of meditative rather than a discursive note. So please just stay for only do 15 minutes or so, whatever. So get yourselves sorted into your meditation postures. So as we just relax, coming into the breath, physicality of our awareness, as it were, you know, the kind of energetic. Just release in the legs. Let the pelvis kind of drop down, open a little. Get a bit of breath into the hip joints there. I can feel my legs are quite tight there at the moment. So I'm just kind of gently breathing into the hip joints. Relaxing the muscles in the upper leg. At the same time, let's release our head towards the sky. So we come into a sense of alignment, not only in the posture, but the posture aligning in relation to the world. Alignment is always in relation to gravity, isn't it, for us? At least when we're in an upright posture. Have the idea of just softening the face and the hand. And then as we've been talking about the heart, it's just in our own way, gently, see if we can be aware of our heart. I think one of the reasons the heart is so interesting for us as meditators is that it holds both sides of us, doesn't it? You know, there's not really any quality you can attribute to the heart that you can't attribute the opposite quality to it. You know, we can be warm-hearted or cold-hearted, open-hearted or closed-hearted. We're associated with love, we're associated with hate. So in the heart, it sort of holds the whole of us in a sense. This is what makes it a kind of alchemical chamber, if you like. This place where the possibility of these dualisms is coming into a creative relationship. Well, just breathing on the in-breath, kind of perhaps imagining kind of gathering yourself to the heart. And on the out-breath, just releasing the heart's release, releasing whatever that might mean for you. Maybe you can just remember or be aware something that opens your heart. Beauty of the world. Kindness of others. It's something that opens your heart, perhaps. I want to emphasize that sometimes this work is very subtle. It doesn't have to be some big experience all the time. Just allow yourself to feel into the heart area and see what that's like for you. What's it like to abide with the heart? Right, soft face. Let's just be aware of one another, sitting. A strange, rather magical thing that these days we can be both apart and in some ways together. It's so important for many of us to learn to allow ourselves to be supported by the world, other people, to allow that in, allow the positive stuff in. Sometimes if we've been hurt or whatever, it's like we close it down, but then nothing gets in. Gentle, abiding with the heart and not trying to force anything, but just to give it some attention, give it some kindness. To take heart, yeah. To take heart, to have courage. No such thing as a risk-free life, is there? But to have courage. And, but don't overthink these things, really. I'm just breathing, being aware of my heart. It's kind of enough, and just see what happens when you do that. Appreciation that we're a part of this community that thinks it's worth sitting quietly together. Cultivating awareness and love. We're wishing ourselves and everyone here well. May we all fully blossom. In our own unique ways, may we bring love, kindness into the world. Before you say anything, can I just say thank you for coming and attending this retreat, and it's been a delight for me to do it, and very helpful for me. You know, I go through my own processes on these retreats, and find it very supportive to be with you all. And a particular thanks to the Buddhist Centre Online and our two lovely hosts that we've had over the whole week. So thank you so much, and I hope we all, well, I don't know if we will all meet again, but we will meet again. Yeah. Many of us in various combinations.
Thanks, Paramanda. I'm not going to let you run off your dinner just yet. We'll have a wee bit more thanks for you in a minute.
What about my dinner?
We'll send a piece around or something later. Just a few last bits of housekeeping. You'll notice in the chat that I've posted the list of poems as a PDF file. It doesn't yet have the book recommendations, so we'll add that and then send that out by email, but you can get the poems right now if you like.
Can I say that about the poem?
Yeah, go on.
Well, I just want to say, you know, don't well, no, I won't say that. I was going to say, I sometimes get them a bit wrong, just so people know that.
Anyway. Not very much. You don't. It's like a living tradition with you quoting poems. It's great. I thought it was really lovely when Paramanda was just talking about being grateful to be in a community that thinks it's valuable to sit quietly together every day, which still strikes me as like an amazing miracle. Just this, like I've got you all in gallery view on my computer, which I recommend if you haven't tried it yet. And just every day, 6 days a week, you can come and sit with a community just like this around the world. It's not a guided meditation. It's just somebody shows up with some bells and rings them. It's in a whole bunch of time zones. So yeah, if you want to keep going and you feel like it'd be helpful to have company, you can meditate every day online with the Buddhist Center Online, and the link is in the chat. And finally, before we say thanks, if you can support us to keep retreats going like this, we'd be really grateful. We are going to do a follow-up with Paramanda later in the year, and there's also going to be a series of more kind of conversational events with Paramanda coming up. So if you value this, if you think it's valuable for other people and you are in a position to support us, and we know everybody is not necessarily in a position during a pandemic, then please do. And you'll also find the link in the chat. I just want to say a personal thanks to Paramanda. When we were talking about this at the start and we recorded the podcast, you said a really good thing, Paramanda, about the body, which was that it was the part of reality with which we had the most opportunity to be intimate. It was the easiest way to be intimate with reality, was this immediate aspect of having a body, a physical body that's part of reality. And it was really brilliant, actually, just sitting with you all week and spooling out of that idea. And I personally loved lying in the fetal position with you drumming and whistling. It's been it's been sort of with me in my dreams at night time. Sort of total delight. So thanks for bringing, your fantastic mind and your body and your spirit to the week. It's been a real act of generosity, and I'm personally very grateful. So thank you.
My pleasure, yeah.
And I just invite you to unmute your mic and have at it with Paramanda, because he's going to get his dinner in a minute. So this is his starters.
Thank you, Paramanda.
Very much,
Paramanda.
Fantastic.
Thank you for your dinner.
Thank you to the team too.
Bon appetit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gracias, Paramananda. Quiero mucho.
Muchas gracias.
Love you, Paramananda.
Lots of love to you, Paramananda.